Hello and welcome back to Building on a Budget Models. I'm Thomas and this is the second and final part of the time attack version of the Nissan 300ZX. The first job to do was to remove the mould seams. Some of them are pretty substantial, and along the edges of the windows and things like that the surface could have been a little bit smoother. I started with a slightly rough one and then moved on to slightly finer sanding sticks. There's also other areas, like for instance here, there are little pinpoints for the front number plate, which I'm not going to use, so those can be removed. I'm now using a Tamiya panel line scriber just to help deepen some of the grooves where the mould seams go over the panel lines. And then when it came to the body kit, there was a little tab that joined the front and rear sections together, but only in one place, so I cut out a tiny little 1mm strip of styrene to create an extra tab, just to help secure them on better. I positioned the over fenders, these are from the Fujimi Set 2, into the position that I liked and used this 10mm Tamiya tape to fix it down. When I was happy with that, I started off with some Tamiya extra thin cement, and in less obvious places like underneath here I used some of their stronger full fat cement. Need to be careful around the tape because the cement can flow underneath there and spread to other places. Then added the front one on here. Those tabs made a lot of help. Just make sure they don't move whilst you're fixing them into place. The front bumper needed quite a bit of adjustment. Found that I needed to sand underneath the bodywork of the car to smooth it out a bit. I left that to cure for a few hours just to make sure that it was nice and secure before removing the tape. Removed this hole for the rear wiper with some putty, and then added the front bumper. Used some tape to secure this to make sure that it was central, before adding some extra thin cement along the edges. And here it was once it was all primed and painted in Tamiya white primer and TS26 pure white. Pretty happy with it so far. All these kits were purchased from Kent Models. You can get 10% off your next order from Kent Models using the code BOAB10. Plus, every time you use it, it helps me and the channel. I printed out some custom decals that replicated a Nismo livery I'd seen on some Skylines and Z cars from the 90s. I put down micro set first and then added the decals. As always with this kind of job, I print more than I need just in case I make mistakes first time round. But I was pretty happy with this. I used the late 90s version of the Nismo logo as that was when this car was still in production. And I really like this diagonal stripe which they used on the bonnet. Rather than having that on its own, which I felt was a little bit plain, I thought I'd use a slightly larger version of the Nismo logo as well. I think that goes together quite nicely. Then use this electrical cutoff and fire extinguisher switch signs here. Got some additional decals from the aftermarket parts set. I'm using some Rays wheels, so it makes sense to put their logo here. And this little website logo on the back. Also used this Ukrainian trident just to show that I stand with Ukraine. Once those decals had set, I very carefully used this low-tack masking tape on the roof, cut it along the mould seams and used it as a template for this Tamiya carbon fibre decal sheet. Low-tack is very important because you don't want to damage the decals or the paintwork of the car. Then used that for the roof here, put down a lot of microset to start with. Now this creased quite a little bit when I was pulling it off. I think I may have been pulling too hard. I used this wet paintbrush to try to settle it down as best as possible. And then also, once it looks right, it's a good idea to just leave it for as long as possible. But here it was, after all those decals had gone down and a few others. I won't be putting down the adhesive Time Attack decals until later. The bodywork was given 3 coats of Mr. Super Clear, also from Kent Models, and then it was polished using 2000 grit sandpaper and their Hyper Polish polishing solution. I then went on to do the inside of these headlights. I used semi-gloss black for this. Then I used a black Sharpie to go around the edge of the headlight lenses to add the rubber trim. Did a little test fit here, which was useful as I could see that I didn't quite do enough black on the inside of the headlight lens. So I went back and went over that. You can see there a little bit of white edge. And there it was, much happier now. I then added some of the vinyl adhesive decals. Cut these out very carefully with a craft knife, tried to get as much of the clear edge off as possible. I tried to use this sideboard here so with all the sort of 2019 Time Attack sponsors, but I just found that it wouldn't go around the body kit that I'd added. I just wasn't happy with the fit at all, so after a while I chose to remove that. And now it was time for the undercarriage. Now the exhaust system goes in quite nicely. This has all been done in matte black, and I'd also added the spare tyre bed at the back. And here I was test fitting some of the aftermarket exhaust parts as I'd cut off the originals. These pinpoints are slightly staggered, so they need to be sanded level. I'll add them later when the bodywork is all on. Now the gears and suspension parts are all joined up together. There's also these spacers to sort of widen the wheel tracking, though I do have some issues with these later on, as I'll show you. These are the rear ones, they go in quite easily, and then this section slots over the top. Not showing you painting any of these, but it's mainly in semi-gloss black with a few silver details, and I've also added some silver weathering powder in places. It's a very simple undercarriage, not too much detail here. Now the wheels all came in chrome because I believe they wanted you to do this chrome strip around the outside, but I just knew that the black paint wouldn't go on very nicely, so I put a little bit of bleach into a cup and left them there for a few minutes. It's always good to keep an eye on these to make sure that they don't start to melt. They were rinsed off in clean water and allowed to dry in the sun for several hours. Then I painted them black and detailed them in silver, added the decals as well. Now the issue with the axle here is that it's not long enough, so that's a real issue if you're going to be adding this body kit, that the wheels just won't be far enough out to fit in the new version. So I got some 2mm acrylic rod, as you can see here, and cut it to 1 centimetre longer than the existing axle. Then I painted that silver and I fed that through. This was a little bit fiddly, but with the addition of a little bit of washing up liquid to lubricate the wheels, I found that it went on fine. And there we are. Don't look at it from underneath because it looks weird, but the wheels are in the right position now. Now I'd used the window masks for the front and rear windows. Here I am adding the sun strip for the Time Attack logo at the front. Pushed that down nicely, and then I used a nice sharp craft blade to cut the excess off the sides. Pretty happy with how that looks. And there's some nice tabs on the inside. Just don't use too much glue as it can spread out underneath to affect the glass. Here I am removing the masks from the rear window. I'm using Hobbycraft acrylic matte black here, which can be a little bit temperamental. If you're not too careful with it, it can peel off unprimed surfaces, such as these windows, very easily. Here it is with the windows and the interior all included. It's then time to go onto the rear spoiler. I cut out some carbon fibre strips for these, left them unpainted because what's the point in painting them if I'm only going to put decals over the top. This one folded up a bit, so I had to be very careful to straighten it out. But again, microsol and a little bit of UMP strong decal solution was helpful here. Chose to add the end plates while still on the sprue, but I found that that was very difficult as they just didn't want to stay up, so I removed those. Then painted the tail light section here. That was done from the inside to make it nice and smooth on the outside. Also did a little bit of silver on the inside of that. That was done in Revell matte black, Revell silver and Tamiya transparent red paint. Fits very nicely. We'll add the decals later. Added these Apex decals to the side of those, and this was also sprayed in satin clear, and that was super glued to the back. It's got a bit of a funny angle, but I think it looks okay. Found this switch in the spares box, and I used one of the holes for the windscreen wipers that I wasn't going to use for this electrical shut-off switch. Then added the wipers. I added the kit wing mirrors, but I realised later that they looked too wide for race car mirrors, so I changed them for some spares. Now there's this radiator intercooler thing which I found in the spares box, which fit very nicely. And then I used some spare photo etch bonnet pins to complete the race car look on the front. Now that all the car was together, I could add these exhaust pipes. I drilled into the back of them so that the existing exhaust system would fit in like so. I then cut out and added the numbers to the exterior. I used 23 as that's the traditional Nissan racing number. If you know why, let me know in the comments. Pretty happy with that. And there's the exhausts all glued in place. I used some Tamiya burnt blue to give them a bit of heat staining. Then we've got this diffuser which also comes with the kit. That's built for this particular model and fits really nicely. That's just done in semi-gloss black. Now to add some side windows, I used some clear plastic which I got from a chocolate orange. I cut that to the right shape and then used a craft knife to simulate one of these window vent things which you often see on race cars. Pretty happy with that. And then because there were little edges in between the door cards and the bodywork, I found that I could fit that in quite easily and without the use of any glue. It's not perfect, but I think it's a big improvement on the windowless look. Found that I had these spare tow hooks from a Tamiya set, so I used the red paint pen to colour those, and then a little bit of foam safe super glue to fit those into place where I'd put the little arrows at the front and rear. I then changed the mirrors. These spares are from the Castrol Supra. I think they're intended for the Team Sard version of that car, but they're much smaller, much more likely to be used on a race car. I used some aluminium foil for the rear. Then I used some more of this styrene sheet to cut out a front splitter to make it look more like a race car. Once I was happy with the shape, I sprayed that matte black and used some more foam safe super glue to fit it into place. and then I found that there were some little supports which I removed from the spare parts of the wing set, which I painted silver and then glued into place at the front, like the ones you see in real life. Finally, I had some Pirelli P0 decals in a tyre set that I had a few years ago, and I just added those to the wheels to complete the Time Attack look. So there we have it. There's a few additional details that I added which I didn't show on camera, like decal on the rear window, things like that. When I had difficulty with the axle on the rear wheels, I did put it away for a few days to try and come up with a solution, but I'm glad that I did. I think that I've learnt quite a lot with this build, done a lot of new things. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Hit the like button because that really helps the channel. Thanks a lot for watching. Please do comment, like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you soon.